Hello and welcome to the Change by Design podcast, where we shine a light on all things engineering transformation. I'm Josh Corman, head of content at Lifecycle Insights, and as always, joined by our CEO and chief analyst, Chad Jackson. Chad, it's our first recording of the new year. Happy New Year. Hope things are starting off well for you.
Yeah, happy New Year. Yeah, absolutely. I can't believe it's 2026. 2025 went by so fast, but it feels like I'm saying that every year, you know? Maybe that's just a sign of where I am in life.
Yeah. Relative time as you get older, when you're 8, a year is an eighth of your life. Now, a little less. I don't want to think about how much of my life it is at this point, actually. But I think I have mislabeled every document that I've started this year and every file I've saved as 2025. So I'm still catching up to actually knowing which year it is. I'm almost there. It's only almost 10 days in.
I
I'm
think there's
almost
a
there.
grace period of like a month for that to happen. So
Oh, I'm going to hold you to that when I mislabel files and no one can find anything. Um, a new year also means something that I had a little experience with. I once worked at a company that did a big presentation at CES and debuted a new product. And at the beginning of the year, the tech world, the engineering world, as a byproduct of that, a lot of eyes go to CES. And I started seeing some stories come in as the conference got started out there in Las Vegas. And all of them are packed with examples of technologies that are at the cutting edge and companies that are trying to kind of push these boundaries. And as I see those stories, having spoken with you a lot, my mind now interprets them a little bit differently. And I immediately think of the engineers behind those technological advancements. And I know you had a chance to kind of look around and see, right, some examples of new products and new technologies that tie into what we've spoken about in the last couple of episodes, which include the complexity of products increasing, the need for engineering companies to develop new competencies to be able to work some of those new things in. And so I'm guessing as you look at the products rolling out and the stories rolling out from CES, your mind might go to a similar place and have some sympathy for the engineers behind some of these big advancements.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah. It's crazy. So I'll just read some of the ones that were highlights for me. ARM, Tesla, there's a AI 5 chip. It's 40 times faster than a similar type of offering before. NVIDIA has a Drive Thor IT stack. Teradar and Siemens have a Lidar that is, it's a new sensor for vehicle autonomy, and that's growing. Siemens actually has something new, a digital twin composer that is,
Hmm.
and also there's an industrial AI OS from Siemens that is in partnership with NVIDIA. And then there's physical AI, and I think that's going to be the theme of the next year. DeFi exoskeleton. There's a Roborock rover, but a big takeaway for me is the composition of these products continue to change at a torrid pace, right? So we're seeing more and more cutting edge processors. We're seeing AI in there as well nowadays. And that has dramatic effects. And we talked a little bit about this before, but the competencies you need in an engineering organization. If you're going to be sticking an
Mhm.
AI agent or model into your product or connecting to it in the cloud, you need to have some experience and capabilities, skills to handle that. Um, Same thing with processors. You need to be able to manage that. And I think, and we're going to get into this discussion a little bit later. There have been discussions around PLM and the value you get out
Mhm.
of it. I think the IT stack, not only the competency changes for engineering, but the IT stack is evolving and changing pretty dramatically. Because if you look at it, what solution is supporting the development of an AI that goes into a vehicle or an aircraft? Is there an
Mhm.
IT solution out there that does that? I mean, it's not PLM. You could argue it's not application lifecycle management or Git. Does it really work that way? But for engineers, it's very, very difficult to kind of manage that and deal with that complexity and that and have like a single source of the truth. So Yeah, and that's what we're here to help with ultimately at Lifecycle Insights with InsightEX. Do cutting edge
Yeah.
research, understand how the engineering operations, how it is changing over time, and what works, what doesn't work. Um, so yeah, CES is a really interesting kickstart for 2026. And I'm so excited about what we're doing here with our research and the conversations we're having. So
Yeah, we're going to touch on some of that research a little bit later. We've discovered some stuff, gotten some findings in place, and started to kind of wrap our arms around those. One follow up I had related to the CES conversation is that we've talked a lot about assessing risk and the value to your business of pursuing some of these things. And if you're a company maybe that's not debuting a new lidar technology, or you're not necessarily playing in that world, but you see these advancements, right? And there's this question of what do we adopt, what do we pursue, what do we not, and how do we evaluate all that stuff? So I would imagine if you're an organization today, you might be looking at some of these. It seems to me like it would feel very overwhelming to sort of navigate that space. What are the competencies that it makes sense for our company to develop when it feels like there are a million different directions you could go and there are a ton of different pressures kind of on these organizations as, like you said, technologies and new capabilities come out at this torrid pace.
yep, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's extremely challenging and it's really tough to make decisions. And I think 2025 was a really good example. If something I've seen, when I go on LinkedIn, when I have these conversations, is man, there's a whole bunch of new roles in engineering
Mhm.
that's dedicated to AI. So that's an example of an organization or organizations in the industry building up a new competency. In 2024, it just wasn't there.
Mhm.
People are hiring it on. So, part of it is a lot of these organizations are operating in the dark. They're making decisions
Mhm.
based off of opportunity and threat assessment of what they think peers are doing, what the rest of the industry is doing, competitors, and yeah, operating in the dark because there hasn't been a lot of guidance around
Mhm.
2026. You need to have AI capabilities or competencies. 2027, you need to move on to this other field. Maybe it's a progression from semiconductors to AI specific semiconductors, right? Which is
Mhm.
brand new space or cloud competencies, storing data and having
Mhm.
software running in the cloud that connects to your product. And by the way, there I'm talking about vehicles and aircraft and
Mhm.
implantable medical devices. So Mm. yeah, it's really, really hard. And so far there hasn't been any guidance, and that's kind of the gap that we're looking to fill.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that, it's interesting to hear you frame it that way is, if in 2022 or 2023, somebody had, said, all right, well, where do we need to be by 2026 and what competencies make sense? Would anybody have been able to, have the foresight to kind of see where even just things like, using AI for whatever specific functions within their tool sets. And I don't know that there would have been clear visibility to that. I mean, even
No.
using, generative AI experimentally and kind of looking around and seeing what it's capable of, the speed at which it's changing what it does and how well it can do things, just for me, feels overwhelming and feels
Mhm.
like it's advancing at a rapid rate. So when you talk about, as you're saying, embedding these things into systems that are already incredibly complicated and that are safety critical, right? Or mission critical in the case of aerospace and defense, right? Where there
Yeah.
there are these non-negotiables that really have to be in place. So you're balancing not only the development of a competency, but you're having to hold it to a standard that is
Yeah.
exceptionally high, and especially in those industries.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And also, by the way, balance the delivery of
Right.
product development projects or programs that you've already committed to your CEO. If you're an engineering executive, you still
Right.
have to deliver that, even though you realize halfway through the year, good grief, we need a competency around AI. Right. So
Yeah.
it's,
Yeah.
it's the proverbial, spinning plates, and
Mhm.
balancing it and finding the right balance there. but yeah, this complexity expand in the direction of every domain. You talk
Mhm.
about materials, for example. Do you
Mhm.
need to develop new
Yeah.
materials for a cutting edge product, or can you get away with what's available in the industry? Um, that's just another example, and it's true of electronics. It's true of software. We're seeing, talk about AI. We're seeing a revolution of
Mhm.
software development with vibe coding, or coding alongside an AI as a partner. And we've even seen it inside our company, right? We've been developing applications as part of this platform, and certainly people are using AI as part of that. And it dramatically changes things. It accelerates things, mm, at a great rate. So, um, yeah, it's hard, but that's why executives are in these positions. They're capable. They have navigated these challenges in the past. And even though there are new challenges facing them today, they're capable of facing them. And that's what we want to augment, right? So help them make informed decisions about that.
Yeah, yeah, it's a really good point that all of this talk about developing new competencies exists on a parallel track with everything else your company already does.
Yeah.
You don't get to opt out of, like you said, all of the development and deadlines that are tied to that just because you also need to add, kind of something to the pile of your capabilities.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and a challenge, I'm sure, like you said. Well, you've mentioned kind of trying to fill that gap and provide a little bit more clarity, shine a little bit of a light on that darkness that people are trying to operate in. Um, and to that end, we've put out research. We've been talking about this, right? That we've had research in the field trying to think about specifically, this question of change, right? And navigating these decisions and the complexity, not just of your products, but of the whole decision making process as a result of everything else we've discussed. You were really
Yeah.
excited to see the research before it came, I know. I don't think I've ever seen you so giddy as when it was, about to be delivered. And we've gotten some of those findings in. You had a chance to kind of, pore over things and see some, takeaways that I think at the top line, level are pretty interesting takeaways about where companies are in this process, how they navigate these things, and what they experience as they kind of go through the change process.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It was really, yeah, I did geek out a lot about it. We did some travel over the winter break. We were stuck in a car for a good amount of time for that. And my two daughters were prisoners of me explaining, like, it was 52% instead of 75. You wouldn't believe it. But yeah,
Captive
so
audience.
captive audience, exactly. Someone has to listen to me ramble on. So, but no, so we executed a study in November and December of 2025. And there are three major components. Kind of the success of initiatives in the life of a change agent is the first thing. We're going to be publishing a lot of that here in January. We got MBSE. We're going to be publishing that in February, and we have MBD, model-based definitions, model-based enterprise, and we're going to be publishing a lot of that in March. So it's very, very exciting. But we have some early findings, so let's talk about that. Excuse me. So one of the big questions we asked was, are your initiatives successful or not? And we had uh, something that ranged from not successful at all to high levels of success. And it was pretty fascinating. So 82% said they met strong or outstanding success with their initiatives.
Mhm.
That's really good news, right? And so what that
Yeah.
means is pretty much if you're going to pursue an initiative, you're going to achieve success in some pretty high level of measure.
Mhm.
And that's really, really great. But as we talked about, if you've heard this podcast before, if you've watched us on LinkedIn, we talk about value and we talk about success there. We talk about risk, right? So the other question that we asked with this is how much resistance did you run into? And again, we had gradated answers for that. 42%. So they met high or extreme resistance. Okay, so this is really interesting. The 42% is a pretty high number, but it's not consensus, right? It's not everybody, right? It's less than half. So there's that. And then 23%, same question, met minor or no resistance. Okay, so that's fascinating to me. Of course, the stuff in between is moderate resistance, if you're doing the math. So what that tells me is, boy, there's this huge spread of how much resistance these organizations are encountering with their initiatives. Even though they're achieving success, the cost to get there for some is very, very high. For some is very, very low, right? So what's the difference? In we're doing a benchmarking kind of activity. It's ongoing right now. We're going to review findings next week. Maybe we can share a little bit about that then. But I think there's a caveat that goes into this as well, which is Sarah Junio on LinkedIn, who is she does analysis of change initiatives and what resistance you encounter as part of that. And she's a great saying, resistance is a form of feedback. So as a part of this finding, I want to put a caveat out there in that because you encounter resistance doesn't necessarily mean it's bad, right? It's an opportunity to engage the organization and get them to invest, actually, to have them voice concerns, to have them get involved and tune and tweak the initiative so that it is more successful. Now, there is a bad part of resistance too. It's not, don't get me wrong, it's not all good. You can have productivity loss. If people don't know what to do, if people are circumventing the new way of doing things, obviously that's not good. So it's a mixed bag. But anyway, we're digging in further to understand what are the factors that affect resistance and success too. We're going to be looking at that. But again, that number's so high.
Right.
That's not where the focus is right now.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? The as you mentioned kind of at the start, right? If you set out on one of these initiatives, then the likelihood is, at least based on our research, that you're going to find, like you said, a level of satisfaction in the success you've hit. What if you have X number of goals? I would imagine strong success means you've hit a solid number of those and feel good about the progress you've made, outstanding, even beyond that. But I think my question in hearing that is then, doesn't it make sense for these organizations to, like you said, accept that you're going to get resistance? So I know that you said some portion encountered minor or no resistance. I would love to know what those people are doing, right? What those organizations are doing, because it does make me wonder if there are systems in place organizationally to account for that, right? Listening sessions and feedback sessions and people whose roles it may be specifically to go in and train or answer questions and deal with some of the, resistance that isn't born just of, well, this is stupid and I don't think it's a good idea and it's not going to change anything, right? It's not just obstinance, it is, well, what does this mean for my job? Is this a reflection on my performance? What if everything changes and I don't know what to do? Am I going to end up getting, squeezed out? What does this mean for my role or the roles around me, and my own competency in my job and my ability to be effective in it? And those questions all are existing. They have nothing to do with the technology you're adopting. They have nothing to do with, right, like the specific KPI that you're trying to, increase. It's all about the individuals kind of putting that stuff in practice. So I'm curious, I guess, from your perspective, does it feel like that, engineering companies can kind of take that resistance and use it as an asset, plan for it in the beginning? Maybe it extends the timeline of implementation, but you reach implementation with much more buy-in. You reach implementation with, much more of a foundation in place to carry forward and not have, well, it's 6 months later and, Glenn is still working his way around this process because he doesn't either understand it or has not kind of been assured that it's okay, that he can do it and he's going to be given the leeway to kind of learn through that process. I think
So I think from a change initiative strategy perspective, I think you hit the nail on the head. you're
Mm.
going to encounter resistance. And if you think you aren't, then, yeah, maybe you figured out something everybody else in the industry has not yet. Good for you. That's
Yeah.
awesome. But I think in general, I think the admission that you're going to encounter resistance is valuable, and because it lets you plan strategically, right?
Mhm.
So I think that is a crucial point that all these leaders need to kind of take into account. Now, just like with any other kind of capability that you want to get in place, there's a process component, there's a people component, there's a technology component. So from a process perspective, we did ask a bunch of questions around activities. Do you hold
Mhm.
feedback sessions, in lots of things like that? And that's what we're benchmarking against. But from a people
Got it.
perspective, this is where you need to have people in the change agent role that have the right skills. And specifically,
Mhm.
this gets to soft skills. This gets to emotional intelligence or EQ. Um, Addressing all the legitimate concerns that you just mentioned. Am I going to lose my job because of this? Is my
Mhm.
role going to be minimized or reduced because of this? Um, you need to be able to listen to that. You need to validate that, and you need to talk through it, right? And that's a different skill set than what you normally see in an engineer. They're really great at
Mhm.
what they do. That's not a negative. They have specialization in other things, and they're really great at what they do. But handling the people side of change initiatives is a different beast, and you need to manage it carefully. So that you're right on all those fronts. So strategically, an admission that resistance is going to be part of the change, and then having
Mhm.
process and people skills, roles, experience to kind of walk through that change and manage the people side of it. Really, really, really
Mhm.
crucial.
Yeah, yeah, I think that makes a ton of sense. And if this is of interest to anybody listening, we did put out, I think, on LinkedIn an article last week, maybe about kind of trying to define those roles about change agents and what they're not all created equally. They might serve different functions along this change process. And we've identified those. I think we've talked about them here on the podcast before, so we don't have to go into great depth. But the idea that you have somebody who is sort of exploring the solution and what opportunities there are and trying to kind of lay some groundwork for how this can work and whether it can help you meet your goals, handing that over to somebody who can go through that people side, that middle, the navigator is what we've kind of dubbed them. And they play a really critical role in that section of translating we figured out technically that it can work to here's how we can apply it within our organization, the teams that we have, and get it to that point where there is buy-in, and then you can kick it off and manage it effectively going forward. So I can we can link that in the show notes, and I think if people are interested in that concept of the change agent and kind of the different functions that they can perform as part of this whole process, there's I think we went pretty in depth in that and give a little bit more clarity and specificity about how those things impact the end result, right? And that level of resistance that you feel and the value that it brings you. Because if you hit some resistance, but you learn a ton about your teams and what they need and what they're afraid of, and then you put it in place in a way that works for them, that's all to the good. Like,
Yeah.
the resistance will have been worth it if you can kind of weaponize it essentially for your own ends,
Yeah.
and thinking about it that way, I think because it is hard to be a leader and hear 25 people going, "Oh, another change," and you get that sort of feeling of, oh, this is going to be a fight, every step of the way. But really, you're on the same side.
Yeah.
You're the management, the executives, the people actually having to kind of live life with these solutions at the end of the day. They are they're on the same side against a problem,
Yeah.
not
Mhm.
in opposition. And it can so easily feel differently than that, I'm sure, within these, very high pressure, like you said, these executives expected to deliver things,
Yeah.
they can't pull punches. They have to keep it up. But I think using it and thinking about resistance in that way
Yeah.
would be a paradigm flip that could really help a lot of organizations.
Yeah. Yeah. I completely agree. And by the way, I mean, this is change initiatives are a double edged sword, right? In one way, they are good in that it helps modernize engineering operations or product design and development operations to meet new challenges. That's especially true of the nature of today's environment, which is very, very volatile. We started off this
Mhm.
conversation talking about CES and just how fast things are changing. You're going to need to keep
Mhm.
up. And your engineering operations that you have today probably will not be suitable or good enough a year and a half from now, 2 years from now.
Mhm.
So you better employ these change initiatives to get better. And by the way, if you don't and you fall behind, this is where an outdated, slower organization can get into trouble, right? This is where you miss revenue and you got to get costs in line with revenue. And that's where layoffs can happen. Now, I said it's a double-edged sword because on the opposite end of it, if you are too aggressive with change initiatives and you're constantly in a state of disruption,
Mhm.
you actually end up with the same result we just talked about, right? You're not able to deliver a product or launch a product that helps your company compete or garner new revenues. And if you don't have new revenues, you got to get costs in line with revenues, which leads to layoffs. So I know both sides of this at an extreme lead to the same
Mhm.
place. It's a circle, I guess. But and that's why you got to find the right balance with value and risk ultimately.
Yeah, yeah. I'll be interested to see from our research because I believe we have a question where one of the answer responses is about uh, the, like you said, the ways in which companies kind of plan for and deal with resistance and work through that. And I think one of the things we said is people's sense of resistance coming from that exactly what you just described, that cycle of seemingly endless change and disruption, and everything is in upheaval, and it can create cynicism, right, among teams where they're like, we've been through this before and what has really changed, or and that is adding to that sense of resistance. But even that is good feedback to get. If your people feel like that's the case, then maybe worth an investigation. um, on the subject of specific change initiatives and moving around, to change gears a little bit, you alluded to PLM earlier, and some conversations that you've been having around, you know, what makes it really valuable, and how organizations can extract value from that. And I think you quibble a little bit with the idea that if PLM does not go beyond engineering and touch all of these other departments, then it's not worth it. There's not value to be had. So I'm giving you a chance to clear the air, speak your piece, as folks in my neck of the woods say sometimes, about PLM and where where there really is value from it, even if it doesn't sort of extend beyond the boundaries of engineering.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, there were several ongoing discussions on LinkedIn. People have posted stuff. Andreas Lindenthal, who's a consultant, 10-year person in the industry. I respect his opinion immensely. Same thing with Jim Brown, Michelle Boucher, worked for Tech Clarity. But there have been lots of other people that have kind of weighed in on this. And the core thing that kind of caught my attention in an original post is that if you have not, PLM and engineering is low value, and I think it was said not the full ROI. And
Mm,
PLM once you extend it to the enterprise outside of engineering, that's high value and the full ROI. And I'd fundamentally disagree with that statement. Um, and there's a few reasons why you can get tremendous value out of PLM just within engineering. That's one thing. Um, the other thing is if PLM is not doesn't cover the full footprint of today's products. What I mean by that is
mm,
software, semiconductors, really are not the development cycle of those things is not managed within PLM today. It's
Mm,
really good with mechanical hardware. You could say to an extent, electronics and electrical systems can be managed there, but maybe not as a um, first degree citizen, first class
mm,
citizen alongside mechanical hardware. So extending a partial footprint representation to the rest of the enterprise, um, I'm going to argue that's of limited value too. You really need the full representation to be shared with the rest of the organization. Same thing, and by the way, when we talk about software, we're talking about parts of the architecture that live in the cloud. Almost all vehicles that are coming, that are being released, that you can go buy in the coming year that are new, have a component of their software architecture that lives in the cloud. Does not live on the
mm,
car in any way, shape, or form, but they communicate back and
mhm,
forth. So, also, for example, cybersecurity. We talked before
mhm,
about how the attack surface of modern products is huge now. It's in the cloud.
mhm,
You got software that runs on the vehicle or aircraft or whatever it's going to be. Uh, Bluetooth connections, sometimes it's part of the processor, sometimes it's part of the board. You have antennas, cellular antennas that are in these same things as well. So PLM has not been used to manage cybersecurity as part of the design and development cycle. So there are
mhm,
holes here. And I do think there's value in taking the stuff that's in engineering and exposing it further down i- into the other functions and departments that participate in the product development process. But I
mhm.
think PLM has some major gaps in terms of what it can fill and the role that it plays today. So that's one of the major points.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting you bring, up cybersecurity. Like you said, we've talked about that previously, as a new competency to develop. But, in this case, it seems like it's also maybe an example of what you referenced a few minutes ago, which is, one of those things where if you don't take steps to maybe, make it not just a thing you do at the end of the product development process that you throw over the wall to IT like you described previously. If you don't change that, you might find yourself in the position of being one of those companies that's behind
Mhm.
your competitors, right? And you don't maybe have the reputation, or maybe you do, worst case scenario, you suffer a very public breach of cybersecurity because those processes have not kind of been integrated in a way that really takes cybersecurity in account, from the beginning.
Yep.
So we do this every week as we have these conversations. I'm like Charlie Day from It's Always Sunny with the red thread and the wall behind me. I feel like I'm seeing all of the connections come together because, all of this stuff, you reach a point where it starts to fold into another one of these conversations about the challenges facing organizations and how they assess their own, internal state of being and where they need to get to and what needs to happen so that they don't find themselves in that position where you're kind of lagging behind your competitors and you start to have those issues of revenue and
Yeah.
then layoffs come into the picture, and obviously that's not a position anybody wants to find themselves in.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. Yeah. And it's because, these conversations are great. And differences of opinions are really, really great. As long as it's done in a professional and respectful, collaborative type of manner, we can have different opinions and that's okay. But mm, I do think PLM, which was introduced 25 years ago,
Mm,
mm, in the context of the changing composition of the product, I mean, there are real questions to answer. Mm.
mhm,
And, frankly, there are opportunities for new entrants in this space that combine PLM, ALM, application lifecycle management, and covering all these other competencies, silicon lifecycle management for processors,
mhm.
cybersecurity, kind of all those types of functions. Mm. I think there's an opportunity for someone to move into that. And even AI, probably the most crucial one, include a development platform for AI that is integrated with all this other stuff. Mhm. So Yeah, I think what I'm going to do is start a series of counterpoints to kind of split these conversations off because there's a lot here. There's a lot to unpack,
Mhm.
but I'll probably start a series in LinkedIn to explore these topics over time and have a robust conversation, a robust debate. And at the very least, I'm not looking to prove one opinion right over the other, but at least the
Mhm.
conversation will expose the people that are affected the most with different opinions and different perspectives and educate them on what they need to think about and what's the right fit for them.
Yeah. So you hear that, people. Talk to Chad on LinkedIn. He'll be professional. He will not yell at you or call you names if you have a different opinion than him. Promise. I can attest to that. No, I think that makes a ton of sense. And I think too, you expose those ideas to people who are affected by them. And that's where you do get the, well, yeah, that's all true. But what about my company's specific situation? You start getting into kind of the detailed ways in which people might be, or their roles might be, or their teams and their processes might specifically need to be worked in with all of this stuff. And so, getting that exposure, I love the idea of having as many people as possible sort of sharing their experience out, because it isn't going to be identical for everyone, but I'm sure that there's value to be had just from seeing those perspectives, right?
Yeah.
And talking through those things. So, um, well, yeah, I'm excited for that. I think that people getting involved with you on LinkedIn is good because then you bring those things here, and then I ask you questions to explain yourself so
Explain
that I can
yourself.
understand it.
It's so funny.
Explain yourself, and that's how we.
It's so funny in a lot of these conversations. I think back to that scene in A Few Good Men where Tom Cruise says, "I want the truth," and Jack Nicholson says, "I know the truth." Or I don't know. I don't know if in that meme if I'm Tom Cruise or Jack. I'm yet to figure that out. So
Maybe you're both. You're trying to present a balanced,
yeah,
trying to provide a balanced picture there. Chad did not order the code red. Just for
no,
everybody listening, that wasn't him. He did not order the code red. That's where Jack got
uh,
into trouble. Um, well, so to bring this back to us, right? We've kind of talked about what we hope to, the role we hope to play in this process for companies and for organizations. Kind of looking to navigate it, and we've been building toward that. We've got some components, some aspects of our project, our site that are going to be live. So tell us a little bit about where that stands.
yeah.
I know we're getting close to the light of day here. So what's coming up with InsightEX, and what can people look forward to seeing?
Yeah, I'm really, really excited about the progress that we've made. So again, just as a refresher, InsightEX is the platform that we're using to kind of deliver our subscription and a bunch of features to our membership. So let me walk through those. So there's four major features that will be part of this. So one is a resource library. It has all of our research, podcasts, webinars, AMAs, reports, guides, blog posts. There's just a ton of content on there. So there's that. Second thing is a community forum. So this is a vetted community of change agents, no software providers, no consultants. And you can go there and ask questions of the members to say, hey, we think cybersecurity is a huge issue. What's everybody else doing here? Right. And you can not just hear from us. Yes, we will answer, but also hear from your peers. Like, nope, not doing it. We found major issues. Instead, we contracted with
Right.
a consultancy to help us with that in the short term. So community forum where you can engage peer change agents, no software providers, no consultants. The third thing is online assessments. So as I mentioned before, we do benchmarking with our research, right? So we build indices, we split up respondents into groups, and then we do crosstabs to understand, does this group encounter success or resistance at higher or lower rates than this group, right? Well, what we can then do is we can ask you questions, the same questions, and based on your answers, we'll drop you into one of those 3 or 4 or 5 groups and say, hey, you're at high risk, you're at low risk, that type of thing. So there's a whole bunch of assessments that we're developing online that'll give you guidance and connect back to our guides and our publications and our research to say, okay, here's the backup for our recommendations. So that is the online assessments. The third thing is an advisory center. So we're going to be offering an advisory service. So if you want to talk with me to talk about your digital transformation or engineering transformation journey, what it looks like over time, or a specific initiative, we can set up an advisory engagement where you get access to me one-on-one, right? And that can be obviously in calls, but we want to have a persistent location where you can access all the materials, all the interactions, all the comments, all the call videos, like everything that is part of the deliverable for you, and not have it lost in email,
Yeah.
and that type of thing. So the advisory center is another component there. So, okay, so what's coming out and when? So, resource library discussion forums will be first. Okay, so that's going to come out in the next couple of weeks. We have something called a founders program where we're looking for a set of people. I think it's going to be 50 or 100, and we're going to cap it. We're going to bring in a set of people to say, okay, this is what we're doing. This is how we're doing it. What do you think? Give us feedback, right? And based on that, we're going to drive change. We're going to be community driven. So that's going to be the first component. After that, the online assessments will be available. That's probably going to be a couple months. We're refining that. We want to make sure that we get it right. Anything that's automated like that. The advisory center is probably 3 or 4 months away, something in that range. But yeah, that's kind of the roadmap in terms of what we're doing. I'm really, really excited to get this available, to provide the guidance, to help engineering organizations navigate what's a really turbulent time. That's our mission, to help engineering organizations navigate transformation by minimizing risk and maximizing value. So that's kind of where we're at. We'll give more updates as we go, but Josh, yeah, that's the latest state of things.
Awesome. Yeah, we are near the end of the tunnel on a couple of those elements of the platform, and it's definitely really exciting. Yeah, I think it's going to be really valuable. I know, like you said, the resource library is robust, and it's getting more robust by the day. You're having a lot of great conversations with people, and we're kind of taking ideas from those conversations and thinking about, okay, how can we work this into the kinds of the ideas that we have, the principles that we're sort of that are driving us forward. So really excited for all that stuff to come out and for people to see it. Before we wrap up, I want to tell you my favorite thing from CES that I saw. It was a vacuum, the little robot vacuums that vacuum your house, that could walk downstairs. And I like to play it. Yeah. I like to play a game with myself when I see something like that. And I want to know how mad the engineer got at the marketing person. It's like, what if we made a robot that could walk down the stairs and vacuum your stairs? That's really the one space we've not been able to figure out. So yeah, that's out there. It's like, a little thing, and it just stair steps up. So salute to the engineers and the marketing people who devised that. It looks like it works great. Hope that all that comes out smoothly.
Yeah,
that was my favorite.
That's a great one.
Technology. It's not quite an advanced Lidar system. I don't know that there's a heavy amount of AI built into the walking robot, but that was still my favorite thing that I saw.
Yeah.
I liked it.
No, that's really cool. And engineers also get very frustrated when the marketing people come in like a week before launch and like, yeah, let's embed Alexa in it. No,
surely they wouldn't do something like that to the engineers. Maybe part of the resistance training, and you just have a room where you can go and break stuff, or one of those like punching bag rooms, where you just let it all out. And they're like, "Where's Larry?" He's in the room. You just leave him be for a minute. He'll come out. He'll be fine. In 10 minutes, he'll come out. He'll have broken a bunch of plates, and he'll feel 1,000% better.
Right.
So,
yeah, that's hilarious.
Yeah, I don't know that we're going to get into that side of the process with our subscribers, but I'd like to. I'd be interested. I think those stories would be a lot of fun. Chad, it's great talking to you again, as it is every week. I always learn a lot. And as I said, I'm connecting more threads and dots. And sometimes I get close to insightful observations. I'm working my way there.
You do.
So it's been been a great conversation. Thanks to everybody for listening. Chad, thanks to you. Take care, and we'll see you next time.